evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Trinity County Planning Commission on September 26th. This is a special meeting. Before we get started, can everyone pledge allegiance? Of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with justice for all. So before we get started, we're going to have some public comment. Members of the public may directly address the Planning Commission on any item on the regular agenda calendar. Do you have any public comment in the room? Any public comment on Zoom? Okay.
Adrian?
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, staff. I just want to make clear that this evening I'm speaking for myself specifically and not necessarily for the Trinity County Agriculture Alliance. Read through this packet, got a pretty good grasp of it. I'm not trying to say that I'm against this proposal or other opt-outs, but what I need to see is, I don't know, like essentially accurate and honest reasons for the opt-out. The parcel sizes. Well, we have an administrative buffer reduction now, not the old-fashioned variance. So the smaller parcels are already intrinsically proofed out. Essentially, there's no real opportunity for cultivation in any of those. I'm not sure what size would qualify itself as too small to begin with. We have a zoning ordinance that exists. And I also noted that there are actually quite a number of larger parcels in the opt-out, parcels for anywhere from 7 acres to about 36 acres and so on. Checked out the topography and did my best to look at topo maps, and it seems pretty average for Trinity County. I would also guess it's probably in the DG area and would be covered underneath the grading ordinance. If anybody wanted to do any work there, they would need to get all that work approved and, you know, appropriate mitigations installed. There's already existing water board regulations also that create different levels of mitigation for different percentages of grade. And if it's too steep for cannabis cultivation, I'm wondering what other elements or activities it also might be too steep for. Relating to water, this is the time where we need to really use some sound land use and planning. Is there any data that supports the idea of the water not being available? All new cannabis licenses need a completed CDFW lake and stream bed alteration agreement, which will analyze any well on the property that may be used to make sure that it's far enough away from any water sources, et cetera, to even be used legally. Otherwise, you'd be forced to get a forbear. And also, it just precludes, like we went through before in previous opt-out, it precludes the opportunity for rain catch, which is a really good alternative water source for people who don't have high producing wells. You know, the county already requires a well producing 3 gallons a minute for a license. And if there's no wells producing over 3 gallons a minute in that area, you know, I suppose that lawns and gardens would also probably be excluded by that. So mostly I just want to see, as we move forward with this, you know, we're moving into the general plan. The draft that's out now would already exclude cultivation in that area. And I just want to make sure that we're using staff time and resources, including money, appropriately. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys, for your comment. Any other comment on Zoom? And also, just so everyone's aware, Commissioner Heaton is available. He has joined us on Zoom. So if there's no more public comment, we're going to close public comment and proceed with our regular calendar. Item 1, ordinance cannabis opt-out, Lewiston Mountain View.
Very good evening, Commission. My name is Trinity. I'm the county CAO, and I'm going to introduce this topic tonight. First, I want to let you know and the public know why I'm presenting this item versus other members of staff. Adrian kind of just hit on it in one of his items of his public comment. It's been requested by many individuals and participants in the cannabis program in the past and supported by the Board of Supervisors for the cannabis division staff to spend the least amount of staff time possible on these opt-outs. We've been talking about these 3 legacy opt-outs since early 2024. And since then, I've been taking the lead on this to attempt to minimize the amount of staff time spent on any of these quote opt-outs. This particular opt-out we're talking about tonight, the original request was received on October 5th of 2021. There's been numerous Board of Supervisors meetings on specifically these 3 legacy opt-outs from 2020 and 2021. And the one before you tonight is one of those 3. The Board of Supervisors meetings I'm referencing are January 16th, 2024, February 20th, 2024, April 16th, 2024, and May 21st, 2024. And then the last Board of Supervisors meeting on 16th of July, 2024, there was a specific direction given to staff to develop the draft ordinance that is in front of you and bring that to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately bring that back to the board. The staff report that is in front of you, or that's been provided for this item, kind of goes through some of the history and rationale and reasons for this particular report or request for this opt-out. There was a resolution that the board adopted on that April 16th meeting, resolution 2024-037, and that outlined some specific criteria that any of these 3 legacy opt-outs needed to meet. Only one of those 3 legacy opt-out requests, which is the one before you tonight, met those criteria. Those criteria are listed in the staff report. They included a detailed parcel map with specific boundaries. There needed to be a minimum of 65% of the parcel owners signing the petition. That requirement was met. There needs to be specific reasons for the opt-out request, which that requirement was met and is part of the package in front of you. And then the application needed to be submitted within 90-day time frame of the resolution that I referenced, and the application was received on the 21st of June 2024, which met that requirement. So all 4 of the requirements of resolution 2024-037 were in fact met. So the opt-out was in fact processed. It was processed in the same manner. The same analysis was provided as the previous opt-outs that have been enacted in Trinity County. And we specifically followed those same procedures because precedence has already been set, and we did not want to change those procedures and precedents prior to any general plan or zoning code ordinance that might happen as part of that general plan. So there is a department recommendation, and what we are requesting from the commission this evening on the last part of the staff report. There's 4 items there specific to CEQA guidelines, and then the 5th one is if the commission chooses to send this draft or a version of this draft ordinance forward to the Board of Supervisors. With that, I will stop at least the introduction aspect, and we can move forward with further questions.
Thank you for your in-depth explanation. Does the commission have questions for staff?
Sorry, do you want me to? Go ahead. Yeah, so when looking through the packet, I noticed that there are parcel or support signed for parcels that are not represented in the maps. Additionally, when counting on the map, there's only 37 parcels that oppose the opt-out zone, even though some of the materials state that there's 40. And so those three, I believe they're on pages, I had 34, and I know the other one was after that. I believe it was maybe 30 and 34, 31 and then 34. And so I was just wondering where those parcels are, if they are being included in this opt-out area, or if these parcels are not being considered.
Yeah, you go ahead. I can go ahead. I got it too. Go ahead.
So, good evening, Commissioners. Drew Pavani, Cannabis Division Director. Leading up to this item being presented before you all this evening, I did do an analysis of the APNs listed in the petition, or, on those signature pages. And I believe that I am aware of the parcels that you're referring to in terms of the parcels that have signed the petition in support of the opt-out, but are not included on that map or in this specific opt-out request. And those parcels were identified to be part of a previous opt-out request. And so while agreed that they are sort of duplicative signatures, they weren't included because they are already had previously been included in the Lewiston Rush Creek opt-out, I believe.
So those are in an opt-out zone. So with it reducing from 40 to 37, does it still meet the 65% criteria? Okay. All right. For me, who's responsible for disseminating the surveys? Is it the county or the individuals applying for the opt-out zone?
The individuals.
So okay, I'll come back to that later. Do we know what proportion of residents within this opt-out zone are full-time residents versus second home residents?
I do not.
Okay. Have we done any studies to identify in the existing opt-out zones if there's any change in property values to properties that would be eligible to cannabis, or to those that would not be eligible due to size for the opt-out zones, as if there's any property value change?
No, we have not done any analysis.
Okay, so we don't know if it's economically beneficial for the county, no, or the landowners. Okay. So some of the issues that were brought up, such as increased traffic, noise, guard dogs, lights at night, and generators. So the lights at night and the generators, that should be controlled by our current cannabis regulations, correct? Like if there's lights, they're supposed to be covered with blackout shades, and generators are not supposed to be being used in licensed cultivars. So have we had official complaints on either of those to have our regulatory side of things go out and investigate this and have corrective measures made?
I'll address that, and Drew can prop in if he wants to, but not required. We have had complaints in this general area, I would say. And those complaints have been looked into. Some of them have been validated, some of them have not. Some of them have resulted in a notice of violation, some of them have not. It just kind of depends. There has been both complaints for blackout or light at night, depending upon however you want to look at it. And then generator noise as well. The nighttime complaints are more difficult to validate because typically our staff does not, our code compliance staff does not work at nighttime just due to safety concerns. There are times where the sheriff department will respond to that if it elevates to that particular level. I'm not in a position to comment specifically on any of those, incidences that might have occurred in this area. But in general terms, to address your question, yes, there have been complaints. Yes, they have been looked into, and some have validated, some are not.
Okay. And then with the guard dogs, have there been similar complaints as well with animal control that dogs are loose and in the area?
Yes, there have been complaints, again, in general for the whole county, but specifically in this area. Yes, countywide in the last year, we've taken in, averaging about 600 calls for some level of animal control per month. That is not all specific, obviously, for, quote, guard dogs or issues associated with this. We don't distinguish between like an animal control call for a guard dog or a specific complaint. We just track all of the calls that come in for animal control. But there are a fairly significant number, volume-wise, of calls for animal control issues that involve some level of a dog or a complaint about a dog.
Okay. And does it seem, and it's tied to the cannabis specific properties, or it's in general?
I would say more in general. It's hard to tie them, the numbers specifically to a cannabis only property. And I don't want to generalize or speculate in that regards. But I mean, there are some that are on those properties, yes. But I am not going to sit here and say all of them are by any stretch of the imagination, because that's not not in a position to, one, it's not a true statement. So I wouldn't make that statement.
So do you believe that this opt-out zone will have any impact on those existing complaints?
I think in general, I think an opt-out like this and the other opt-outs that we have implemented as a county will reduce those numbers of complaints, yes.
Also, if the existing cannabis farmers are still able to continue to operate, and these are the complaints that are.
I think these opt-outs are as much about the existing as or more so about potential expansion of future cannabis licenses like I said, in the future. I don't believe it's as much about what's currently there than about what might be there in the future.
Okay. Do you know if other mediation attempts outside of law enforcement coming in between the neighbors have been made at all? Were there any discussions in the neighborhood to try to resolve some of these issues internally?
I have not personally been involved with those. If they have taken place at a community level, I'm not aware of them.
Okay. And then are there any pending applications for cannabis licenses in this opt-out zone at the moment?
I don't believe there are any pending applications. There is, I believe, one previously licensed site that has fallen out of the program for whatever reason, but to my knowledge, there are no, currently submitted pending applications within this area.
Okay, so then in our map, it currently reflects 3 sites. Is that currently, even though 2 show the same parcel number, so are there 3 licenses in this opt-out zone at the moment?
Yes, that is my understanding.
And so with how the opt-out flyers are distributed, how do we verify if the individuals who have licenses were actually provided with an opportunity to say that they do not want this opt-out zone to go into place? How do we know that that was implemented, since we have a response of no for the, as a 0, that nobody opposed it?
So what you're asking some of the questions about what the landowners within the opt-out area have done. The county is not involved in that petition or that request out to the landowners.
So we have no accountability to make sure that every landowner receives paperwork within the zone to be able to respond whether they support or deny this.
So I would say it's not about, our accountability. I would say you said there's no accountability. I would not say that. We rely upon, in the way these opt-outs have been set up and the way the procedures have been set up, it's a community-driven event. It's not a county-driven event. These are not county-sponsored. They're not county-supported. I personally don't have an opinion one way or the other on this. This is a community-driven event. The community brings this forward to the commission and the board. And there were, previous to the resolution that I referenced, there weren't any specific criteria established. There were some, I would say, similarities associated with each of the previous opt-out zones that were adopted, but there was no criteria. So there was really not an application, but there was a process that was followed that was fairly similar. So in that resolution that was adopted, we took the similarities that were previously used and we established a process and the criteria that needed to be followed. What you see before you is what that community decided to go do and present to you. Like the map that you're seeing there, that's not a county map. We didn't produce that. We didn't write the APN numbers on there. We left it as it was submitted and made any adjustments or statements in the staff report to it. And that's the same reason that we didn't adjust the APN list that you see in there, because that's not a county document. That was the document that the applicant submitted. We verified it and validated it, but we didn't change it, if you will.
Okay, so you verified that for the names and signatures that are included associated
Correct.
with the APNs, that they
Correct.
are the current legal landowners of those parcels?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And if I may add some clarification, while basically I agree that, the people that are opposed, the way that the templated, letter reads doesn't provide them the opportunity to oppose, but I think it's clear that, the folks that opposed didn't sign the letter. And then just to, give a little more information to some of your questions, I just confirmed with Debbie that all of the parcels within this proposed opt-out area were noticed, and all parcels within 300 feet of the boundaries of this proposed opt-out area were also noticed. So via that process, they certainly have been afforded the opportunity to provide feedback.
Okay, thank you.
And that notice was associated with this meeting tonight and how we would notify those property owners. It was not part of the petition-driven community aspect of it. That was once we got this opt-out request in, once we decided to, that it met the criteria, and then how we published the notification for this meeting tonight as far as the property owner notifications.
Have you experienced that the previous opt-out zones have brought harmony into the neighborhoods?
I'm not going to comment on that. I would leave that probably question up to the property owners if that's something that you wanted to ask them. I'm not going to sit here and answer that.
Okay.
You're finished with your line of questions?
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions?
Oh, yeah, I do. Item 7 in the ordinance says that existing licensees can modify their operation if it doesn't increase the intensity of the cultivation footprint which makes sense. But then in the next sentence, it says expansion of existing operations within the opt-out area shall only be allowed when it is demonstrated there's no impact. So what do you envision by expansion? Are you talking about conversion from daylight cultivation to mixed light, or what expansion of the operation are you thinking that would cover?
I think I can reasonably answer that question, because we have had a significant amount of discussion with county council over the last, 2 years or so, since I've been division director, about that language specifically. So they can't increase the intensity or the footprint.
So that's in the first sentence. So do you really need the second sentence where you're talking about expansion of existing operations?
I mean, I agree that perhaps that second sentence doesn't need to be there, but that is what was established in these previous opt-outs. And I can tell you that we have gone through and done site-specific evaluations for licensed sites that are in the other previously approved opt-outs with these same criteria. And so the way that, roughly the way that we think about it currently is that, expansion of or increase to the intensity of the operation would be something like converting from a previously approved outdoor cultivation site to a greenhouse mixed light operation. And then in terms of within a given license type, I'll use as a specific example, a 10,000 square foot license. Oftentimes what we find is that the individual applicant licensee will have in their approved CEQA document 9,472 square feet. And so we wouldn't allow them to expand beyond the 9,472 square feet specific to any sort of alteration or modification, reconfiguring of that site. They would need to stay within the approved square footage. So if that helps at all.
Yeah, I don't know that, I'm just curious what that allows them to do. So, okay. So just a typo in item 6, I think you want to add April 16th, 2024, as far as the date that they need to be compliant, so forth, so that it's not last year or next year or something. Okay. And one last question. Under the definitions where you're talking about compliant, because we've had this discussion a lot where someone who is undergoing abatement for some issue, it might be abatement for odor or noise or trash collection or something, they're still considered to be compliant. And so is there a way to, or, limit that time frame for abatement or something like that, so that it's, or someone who's not serially violating, their license? I'm just concerned that we've had issues in the past with that being such a vague definition.
So I wouldn't disagree with you on that. We've had numerous discussions about that. I would also state that that is something that will be further addressed in the overall zoning ordinance update as part of the general plan update. And the county has made some specific decisions, not to address some of those issues while the general plan is being written and updated. And I would put your question and statement and request in that category, that it is one that should be addressed. I don't know exactly how it will fall out and ultimately be approved, but it is an area that is recognized that needs to be addressed, and we'll see how it how it ultimately unfolds. But for the purposes of this particular opt-out request and ordinance that's in front of you, for consistency's sake, we have used the same template as the previous opt-outs.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, I have one as well. Mostly, this is a community wishing to have an opt-out to not have cannabis in its area. It's not anything to do with whether the properties qualify as grow operations or what they can support, correct? This is more a community choice. They don't have to qualify because you can't grow cannabis here because of water. It's because the community is asking for an opt-out. Isn't that the only reason? I mean, what are the qualifications besides the community saying we don't want it? Truly.
I would say it's perhaps a combination thereof. The findings that are in this particular ordinance are similar findings that have been in previous opt-outs. There's varying opinions about the level of those findings, and there's various opinions about, is this a community opinion, a community desire? Again, some of those opinions should be heard and flushed out and decided in the general plan update with the community plans that are associated with that, with the ordinance update. But I mean, I've heard varying opinions as far as the root of the ask with these opt-outs. But there are findings associated with each one, and those are articulated in this ordinance as well.
Commissioner Heaton, do you have any questions on Zoom?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Rory.
Thank you. So no other questions for staff?
Nope.
Nope. So can we go to public comment? Do we have any public comment in the room?
Good evening, y'all. Andy Wakefield. I live in Mountain View. I can answer some of these questions for you. Water is an issue. 2 residents have had to drill new wells, excuse me, or lost their water. Coincidentally, each one of those residents are just below a commercial site. We're a little bit farther down. We've had issues with water, not lately, but we've had issues with water. We haven't had to drill a new well, though. 2 people have. Guard dogs, it's probably my call. Mainly because we like to walk around our neighborhood. As a family, you would think, that's my daughter and my wife. So when we out there walking and we have confronted guard dogs, it's a big concern. I called animal control. They said, you don't have a leash law where you live. I said, okay. Well, can you come out and do something about it? No. You can do it on your own, basically what she said. Take it into your own hands. If they're a threat to you, take it into your own hands. The neighborhood has done that. So we're less a couple of guard dogs in the neighborhood because of that policy. I can't remember exactly, ma'am, all the things that you had to say. I could answer a number of them. A lot of what hasn't been said is the quality of life. Quality of life, I've been there 23 years, and it's changed quite a bit in the last 10, mainly because of the commercial grows. And we're not opposed to residents growing their 6 plants. Not at all. But we are concerned about what entity or what may bring into our residential area a large grow, and the results of something that might happen that could affect my family, and my friends in the neighborhood. When I think these commercial grows should be out of these little small residential areas, not opposed to commercial grows, just not in small residential areas. Doesn't make much sense. You won't allow it around schools, but you'll let it, or you'll let it right there where all these kids are coming home. So it's confusing for us. We'd like an answer. It's been over 4 years. We've tried to do everything you've asked. So we'd like for you to understand that our quality of life also matters. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield, for your comment. Any other public comment in the room?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Lisa Wright Lewiston. So 100% people should be able to have a say in what happens in their neighborhoods. And there are ways to do that. Homeowners Association, rezoning to prohibited zoning types, rural, residential, for example, when it comes to opposition to commercial cannabis. But what we've done here is we're hiding behind CEQA guidelines inappropriately being used, NIMBYism being perpetuated. These findings have no factual basis whatsoever. They've been carried forward from previous opt-out ordinances, never any kind of true analysis or evidence provided to substantiate them. This has been presented to previous CAOs, to this CAO. There's been legal analysis done. And why are we spending the resources right now? We're in a budget deficit. And we're here when this whole matter really is being addressed in our general plan update and the zoning update. It's already been recommended by the CAO's office that rural residential be disallowed for commercial cannabis. And here we are. Why? NIMBYism. And the desire to appease people. There wasn't a process. There has never been a codified process for opt-outs. They came up with a resolution here to try to put a Band-Aid on things because people are upset. And I get it. You know, you want to have control of your neighborhood. You want to feel safe, but we're perpetuating again that cannabis is somehow, everything cannabis is unsafe. There are CEQA guidelines specific that are not being accurately depicted here or followed, that say that somehow a notice of determination can be made on a project that hasn't been analyzed. You're devaluing what farmers have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. And that's produced valid, legitimate, fact-based CEQA determinations. Mitigation measures are in place for all these findings. There's nothing unique about this particular geography. This is all a false narrative, unsubstantiated in fact. And it's incredibly disappointing that this is where we're at, again, still. Misuse of funds, wasted time and resources. There are processes in place. And the farmers put up 1.8 million, I want to say, towards this general plan update. And yet here we are spending more resources, including cannabis dollars. I think you're continuing to perpetuate misuse of the law and enabling NIMBYism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright, for your comment. Any other comment in the room? Any comments on Zoom? Okay. So we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission.
So I move that the Planning Commission make the findings of items 1 through 4 and recommend the Board of Supervisors adopt the proposed ordinance with the date clarified in item 6.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Well, I'll start. So, I've sat here longer than the two newest members, not as long as Rory and Todd, but for numerous meetings, the residents of this area have come and asked to be an opt-out area. They've enumerated a lot of inconsistencies with commercial cannabis cultivation and operations with the tight residential neighborhood that they have. Soil trucks zooming down the road, almost running over the kids on the bikes and all that kind of stuff. So I get it that there's just certain circumstances where expansion or addition of commercial cannabis operations is incompatible on numerous levels, including things like water supply, with a residential neighborhood. So what this does is it allows the current cannabis licensees to continue to operate. What it does is prevent additional ones from being licensed in this geographic area, kind of compounding the issues that this neighborhood is dealing with. And to me, that's reasonable. Like, okay, you guys that currently have your license, you can stay, be in compliance, but don't allow additional licenses that would make any problems that we've been having worse.
Any other discussion from other commissioners? Commissioner Heaton, you've been very quiet.
Yeah, I'm tired, but looking at the map, I just looking and it was like I see a few areas where the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parcels did not, and I'm not familiar with this area whatsoever. I'll be 100% honest with you. I have driven on the road going to Trinity Dam from Lewiston, so but where this is, I couldn't tell you from the map that I have. But it's like I don't know what these not where the parcels that were not represented or did not mail in the petition or whatever they didn't sign, but there's an element to where let me rephrase that. There's an element to where it's like you look at which who knows what tomorrow will hold. The world is unsure. Nothing's sure anymore, but the state of the things, I really don't see too much more commercial cannabis licenses at this point going to be put in, just at the state of things. And so I don't know. I don't even see how you could, from the map that we have, I don't see that how you could even access the other parcels, but from the road that was given or from the thing. But it's like I don't know. It was like I hate to limit what is it, industry in our county because there's so little of any industry whatsoever. But I do get it that when you're in a community like that and the majority of the people also don't want it, it's a tough decision. But I don't know. It's like I'm kind of torn between the two because it's like if I was in it, I've shot a neighbor's dog before myself. It's like I don't know. It's a tough deal, but I can see where the vast majority of the people are in favor of it, and we'll just have to, I guess, see how it votes out.
Thank you, Commissioner Heaton. Commissioner Fleets or Commissioner Ellis, any thoughts or input?
So as an opt-out, this isn't a group of people saying they don't want cannabis in Trinity County. They're
Correct.
saying they don't want any more in their area. They're not saying stop what's happening, but they're setting a parameter for their area because they feel like the cannabis industry is a threat to their livelihood and lifestyle. And whether you agree with that or not isn't necessarily the point. The point is they do, and they're here and they're people, and they have a right too. And they've come together collectively and fought very hard for this. And so I think that we're looking at how people feel. We're not looking at how land performs. We're not looking at tax dollars here. We're looking at how people get along. And that's part of this process as well. And so there's been a lot of operation and verification of things that aren't necessarily the root of the problem. And CEQA isn't the root of the problem. Cannabis isn't necessarily the root of the problem. It could be another industry that could be opposed as well, such as a gravel mine or whatever. It doesn't matter, or raising dogs. It doesn't matter. If a community is unified in that, they should have some say in that outcome.
Commissioner Fleets?
So as planning commissioners, one of our duties is to protect the property values of our county. And I struggle with limiting economic growth and then also putting barriers on larger parcels. And I hear what the community is saying, and I'm listening. But I don't know what the trade-off is. And I haven't seen that. I don't know what is happening in other opt-out zones and how those items are changing because opt-out zones are in place. And are opt-out zones actually helping people get along is my other question.
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, there's just a lot of anecdotal data. So for Trinity Center, one of the things we looked at is the number of our Airbnbs versus something like Hayfork, which is not an opt-out area. And so, in the county, if you want to go to stay in an Airbnb, I think there were 2 in Hayfork and there were like 18 in Trinity Center. And so, yeah, I do think it does affect property values. I don't have any data, it's hard to quantify, but yeah, I do think it affects property values if you're in an opt-out area.
I think that's a little hard to equate Hayfork to Trinity Center. If you would maybe say like Mad River or Ruth, where they have a lake, and you could look more at those disparities. But again, very different communities. You do have the airport that has the fly-in for private. Trinity Center has more amenities than some of these other areas. So comparing Airbnbs between the two communities, I see where you're going, but I don't necessarily see those as an equivalent due to the other recreational opportunities available in the area.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's not a fair comparison. I mean, Hayfork is my district. They're my people. I love them. But it's not fair to compare the beauty of Trinity Center to Hayfork. So I think that's not, in my mind, a relevant tie, if you will. I agree wholeheartedly with Commissioner Fleets. I'm not seeing the gains. We've clarified the animal reports and the police reports and the crime reports. And unfortunately, the numbers aren't there. My concern is that cannabis is always, well, I hope it won't always be, but until now, has always been in the dark and hidden. We make these blanket statements like aggressive dogs and trucks almost mowing kids down because they're driving so fast for dirt. I think comments like that are very dangerous to the industry, and shouldn't be made without accurate representation or facts to prove it. We don't have the police reports to prove it. The reefer madness continues. However, I do agree in a person's right to raise their family somewhere where they feel safe. At the end of the day, bad players and bad neighbors cause all kinds of problems similar to this. It's not fair to say the problems the community is having are all related to this cannabis or the cannabis industry or these parcels. You could have a neighbor move in there who is a bad neighbor and leaves garbage everywhere and has unruly dogs, aggressive dogs, and you could be walking your family and you could be attacked by them. So blanket statements against cannabis, I think, are very unhealthy for our community. And as Commissioner Fleet said, damaging economic growth or lack thereof in Trinity County, as we have become very aware of recently. Our budget deficit is a huge issue. To stand in the way of what is arguably the only sustainable industry here is a dangerous path for any of us to go down. That's my thoughts.
So one last comment. I mean, I'm not necessarily always dinging cannabis, but to me, it's more whatever commercial operation it is, it's a commercial operation on rural residential zoning. So essentially, that's the incompatibility, that you have a residential neighborhood with residential zoning next to it that allows commercial cannabis. And you wouldn't have the gravel mine or something like that because it wouldn't be allowed on rural residential. So that's, to me, the issue, that if a neighborhood is saying this commercial land use is inconsistent with our residential neighborhood, that's the decision the Planning Commission should really look at.
Would we allow an apple orchard on rural residential?
Sure.
What about livestock? Do we have an issue with livestock as rural residential?
There are limitations on the number of livestock you can have on RR.
What about a grapeyard, a vineyard?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
This is one of the things where I really what are these parcels zoned as? What are they all RR?
Yes.
Even the small ones in the subdivision, they're all equivalent, or they're in different RR categories?
They're just all RR.
So technically, if that's true, if I'm remembering correctly, the cannabis, when the zoning thing happens, cannabis wouldn't even be allowed to be grown on those anyhow, except for the existing ones that are already there. Is that not correct?
You're saying, I think with the draft general
plan.
plan zoning,
Yes.
they would change to agriculture.
Chair, would you like me to address that?
Yes, please.
It depends. If there is a draft general plan for public comment out there right now, that document does in fact would in fact change the existing locations in this particular area to another zoning. Right now, it's proposed to be ag. And then those other parcels in there would in fact stay RR. The definitions that's the general plan land use designation. The specific zoning guidance has not yet been developed. It is in the process right now. But there will be some adjustments and proposed changes made in those as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So I believe there's a motion. It's time for a vote.
Commissioner Ellis, how do you vote?
Yay.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fleets, how do you vote?
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
How did, I didn't catch what, Commissioner Ellis voted.
He voted nay.
No, he voted aye.
Voted aye. Heard you, thank you.
I said the wrong word.
Okay.
I have an aye for Commissioner Ellis, an aye for Commissioner Fall, abstain from Commissioner Fleets.
Hmm. I guess I could vote aye.
Vice Chair Barrett, how do you vote?
No,
No.
Nay.
Correct?
correct.
Okay. All right, I have 3-1 for the commission to recommend items 1 through 4, clarifying the date in item 6 of the ordinance and recommending this to the Board of Supervisors to adopt, and 1 abstain.
So, yeah, I think my motion was to make the findings of items 1 through 4 and then recommend the board adopt the proposed ordinance with the date clarified in item 6. So because we need to make the determination of 1 through 4.
Okay, thank you. I will write that correctly.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next item of business on our regular calendar, reports or announcements. Any planning commissioners, any reports or announcements?
Nope. I have one quick correction. My last name is Flights, like airplane flights.
Fine, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All good.
Commissioner Heaton?
No, I'm good. Sorry, I wasn't able to be there tonight.
Don't let it happen again. Do we have any deputy director, director comments, reports?
I don't have any formal comments from Deputy Director Presley, who was unable to be here this evening, and I don't have any from myself personally. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, I would like to let you know that our meeting for October 12th. Grab my calendar. We have nothing scheduled for the first Tuesday of October.
10th?
Thursdays. October 10. So we will have no meeting October 10.
Perfect. Thank you. Deputy Director of Community Development, any reports?
So yeah, that's what I previously.
Okay,
addressed.
perfect. Thank you. I was just
Yep.
going through the calendar.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll call this meeting to an end. Thank you. Time, 1 hour, 2 minutes.